Great. So thank you everyone for being here. As Christian said, welcome to our program, Our Village, Our Story, the Black Experience Today in Oak Park and Beyond. I'm Tatiana Swansea, the Restorative Practices Coordinator from the Oak Park Public Library. And in my work, I help coordinate anti-racist and restorative programming for the library. That's included, some of you may have attended, back in May, we did a program on defunding the police, and we have another program coming up on July 28th with the authors of the book Prison by Any Other Name. It'll be an author talk on abolition and restorative justice. And of course, the library is tonight collaborating with the community organization Walk the Walk in this program, which we're very excited about to be here. And this is a series of programming which Christian Harris will talk more about. Christian will be moderating tonight, and he is from Walk the Walk and also a lifelong Oak Park resident. And I will turn it over to him in a moment. But first, I just want to say, you may notice that the Q&A and chat feature are disabled, and that's because tonight is really meant to be a conversation and an opportunity for everyone to listen to the panelists that we have tonight. Right? And I'll turn over to you, Christian.
Thank you, Tatiana. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. This is our second event in the series, Our Village, Our Story, the Black Experience Today in Oak Park and Beyond. So Our Village, Our Story is a collaboration between the Oak Park Public Library and the community group Walk the Walk, as Tatiana mentioned, that I am a part of. Walk the Walk is an organization that's dedicated to eliminating systemic barriers to equity through community bridging, demonstrative activism, and grassroots initiatives. And this event tonight falls under our two pillars of community bridging and grassroots initiatives. The goal of this event is to amplify the voices of Black people in Oak Park and give them a platform to share their authentic experiences with the community. As we learned in our last event, Our Village, Our Story, the history of the early Black residents in Oak Park and why it's important today, traditionally and historically, Black voices have not always been a part of the narrative of this town. And this event attempts to help change that narrative into one where Black voices are valued, uplifted, and part of the public discourse. And for those wondering, the background behind me is the cover of the book Suburban Promised Land, the emerging Black community in Oak Park, 1880 to 1980. And at our last event, we had one of the authors of the book, Stan West, a local historian, come and talk to us about the history of Black residents in Oak Park and how we got here. And today is the next step of us looking and grappling with the experiences that that history has created. So without further ado, let me introduce our amazing panelists tonight, who I'm really excited are here with us. Darien Marion-Burton, owner of marketing and design firm, DM Burton. Thank you for waving. Yes, please do wave. Jacques Shalo, born and raised in Africa, been in the US 14 plus years, and owner of Kribi Coffee, a coffee business. Juanta Griffin, educator and 2021 Village Trustee candidate. Saria Lofton, parent, former Oak Park resident, faculty at a university, and 2021 Library Trustee candidate. And Sydney Jackson, community activist and graduate from the University of Chicago, class of 2021. Congratulations, Sydney. And also is just dedicated to other, sorry, I got a little lost, my apologies, want to make sure I get everything. She's dedicated to a lot of other programming, from creating community volunteer programs in high school to organizing marches in response to police brutality, hate crimes as well. They're committed to envisioning and creating a brighter future for people of all races, socioeconomic standings, and area codes. So thank you all so much for being here. As Tatiana mentioned, I'm Christian Harris. I'll be your moderator / host for the evening. I grew up in Oak Park, graduated from OPRF. I own a business in the community now. Also a DEI and strategic management consultant and business coach. And of course, I do community work like this, as well as other initiatives, as I mentioned before. So without further ado, we're going to actually dive into the questions. The first question is for everyone, and we will have some questions that are directed towards individuals. So the first question is, how long have you lived in Oak Park and why did you decide to move here? I drew from a hat earlier and Cindy is up first. And after that, we can just go around with whoever wants to talk and answer the questions. And as I said, I'm open to some dialogue between panelists if we get to that point. Please know, though, that there's room for you to step forward and offer your opinion, even if a question was not directed to you. And there's room for you to step back if you are not comfortable answering a specific question, or maybe comfort has nothing to do with it. For whatever reason you might not want to, feel free to know that there's room to step back. All right. So first question for everyone, Sydney will go first. How long have you lived in Oak Park, and why did you or your family decide to move here?
Um, well, I've lived in Oak Park since the day I was born. I was born at West Suburban, and my parents have lived in the same house on the 500 block of South Euclid since my entire life and still live there. When I go back there, my twin sister and I still share the same bedroom. We've had our entire lives. So I'm very much so a lifelong Oak Parker. Um, and my part of the reason why my parents moved there is because my dad is black and my mom is white, and beyond thinking about being an interracial couple and where they might feel more less so that they stuck out, they also were interested in moving somewhere where there was like what they felt was like an abundant education system and public schools. So that's why we've been in Oak Park. And by the way, it is Sydney, but last year.
My apologies, Sydney, right? Sydney. Okay, perfect. No, thank you for sharing that. I feel like that's a narrative I've heard a lot, and I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more later on your thoughts on that narrative and their reasoning for moving it. But thank you for sharing. Somebody like to go next? I see Jack.
Yeah, I can go next. So yeah, I've lived in Oak Park for just realized that for more than 30 years, long time. And part of the reason we moved here, obviously, we're a biracial couple. My wife is Caucasian, and we lived in the city. We did a lot of research for where is the right community that we'd want to raise a family. We looked at Hyde Park, looked at Evanston, and we most definitely settled on Oak Park. We felt that it was the most diverse, more proactively diverse, and obviously the commute was a whole lot easier than Hyde Park and Evanston. So that's it for me.
So I want to pivot just before we go to the next person really quickly and ask Cindy, why do you think your parents chose Oak Park over other communities specifically?
Well, I will say, I think at least my mom, I believe, is on this video call right now. And maybe my dad as well. I'm not sure. I sent it in my family group chat earlier. But these are conversations we've had a lot for the better portion of my life. They also did look at Hyde Park in Evanston. They were looking at homes in each place. They had been living kind of like my dad had been living on the north side of the city for a while. They had lived in an apartment in Oak Park, and then they wanted to buy what they considered a starter home in Oak Park. But like that's been the home that we still share. So I think it was also just a matter of like what they found. But again, like he said, very similar as far as like the three areas that were considered as similar.
Definitely. No, thanks for sharing it. Just so the audience knows that this is a trend. I was born in Evanston and moved to Oak Park when I was 3 or 4. So it is very much in the conversations that happened in my family, very much of like, if you're Black, middle class, whatever that means in the American sense. If you think you're middle class, are middle class, and want to live around other Black people that are Black and middle class, or somewhere around your economic threshold, there's only a few options if you want to be close to the city. And so they do tend to look at those 3 locations: Hyde Park, Evanston, and Oak Park. And I was just curious to see if the reasons were similar, and they are, to why my parents eventually decided to move here as well. Commute was a big one for them. So thank you both for sharing. whoever can jump in.
I can go. I moved to Oak Park when I was 5 years old. I grew up with my grandparents, and they wanted to move me and my sister to Oak Park because they thought it was safer. We lived in the West Garfield Park neighborhood. Very much like grew up around a lot of bullets and violence, and I think my grandparents, especially for me, being Black and gay, and I think they knew it at the time. I think they didn't think that that was going to be the best environment for me to grow up in, even with sending us to Catholic school. And so we moved here, and then I've continued to live here. Obviously, I went to college for a little while, came back, and chose to start a business here. And I think the reason I did that is because Oak Park feels familiar to me. I know it, and it's easier to navigate something you know than navigate something that is completely foreign to you. And I knew that starting a business was going to be an insurmountable task. And I think that Oak Park specifically allowed me to capitalize on my social and like personal networks that I developed.
And Darren, you have siblings as well, correct?
I do. Two lovely sisters who are both on vacation and not on this call. So I can speak freely about them.
And well, we won't get into it too much now. But did they make the decision to move back to Oak Park after going through the schools here?
They did not. They did not.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Who would like to go next, Juanta or Saria?
I'll go. I was going to wait it out because my story is so similar to everyone else, except for the middle class part, because we were poor, so we didn't get that part. We came in as renters. My parents were an intercultural couple. My stepdad is from Chiang Mai, Thailand, and my mother is Black. My mother lived across the street on the other side of Austin. Her parents bought a 2-flat at 131 South Austin, and my parents kind of like wanted to be near my grandmother, and they just went right across the street and rented an apartment across the street. And we actually stayed in that apartment until I went to college. So we were there in the same apartment for as long as many people are in a home. And then we moved to another apartment in Oak Park. And we've been here since then. My husband and I chose to stay here. I met my husband in 4th grade at Longfellow School. And we, just like Darien said, I know Oak Park. It is my hometown. It is familiar to me. And I think it's important to give back to your community. And this is the community that I know. So this is the community that I serve.
Beautiful. No, thank you for sharing. And definitely, want to hear everybody's experiences, no matter how similar they are. That can be just as telling as differences. So thank you for sharing. Saria?
I would say I floated back and forth with Oak Park and Chicago. I kind of flirted with both communities. So I started in Chicago, went to Oak Park. It's kind of stressful. So I left in the middle of high school, and I ended up graduating from Collins in North London. Had kids. I sent my son to Suter, and I was like, oh. And Suter was a pretty good school, but I've worked in Chicago public schools, and I think I was a little traumatized. So I moved them to Oak Park. And then, so it all centers around education. And then education was also, it played a part in why I moved them out. So it's always been back and forth. And it's centered around that education space.
Absolutely. And yes, we're going to stay right there actually and ask you a little bit about your decision to leave Oak Park. When you made that decision, how you made that decision, and kind of where you decided to relocate to and why.
I made that decision because I feel like Oak Park talks a good game, but I deal in results. And I was not seeing the results matching with the talking. And that's frustrating when I see I mean, look at all the beautiful, intelligent Black folks on this call, and there's many more in this community. But there is this underlying issue that has not been addressed within the community that allows this level of marginalization that I don't even understand why it exists, and persist. And one, even with procurement, how do we support Black businesses through a school system that gets, I don't know how many millions of dollars, but ensuring that Black businesses are, part of their vendor list and accessible and used regularly. But you're talking about equity should be into the economic development of Black folks as well. So it's things like that just frustrated me. Educationally, it seemed like there was just stagnation, and there was a lot of talk, and again, no action, and I didn't feel the kids were benefiting anymore. So I moved back to Chicago. Again, flirting with Chicago, so I'm back in Chicago again.
No, thank you for sharing. And I definitely understand the sentiment, and appreciate you being honest about that. I'm curious if you feel comfortable. I'm just about ask if you could share, how was it affecting your children? Did you see anything in them? Or was it just kind of your decision? How was Oak Park, affecting them? I guess the school system.
I felt they didn't know I wanted them to learn more about all these positive attributes of that we espouse as Black people. I want them to learn about like the Lorraine Hansberries. I want them to learn about more about like who we are in multiple aspects. And I didn't want it to seem as if they were being put on the spot or pigeonholed. And I also didn't want them to think that because they're Black, it's associated with special education, or if they're Black, it's associated with a reading issue. Because I noticed a thing in Oak Park where certain programs had a certain higher percentage of Black kids. And I wonder, well, how does this happen if we're all about racial equity and all this stuff, and we're trying to move, have a diversity throughout the programs? And I had to have conversations with teachers way more than I really wanted to, but I know it's my job, I'm a parent. But I was really frustrated with how Black children were discussed, how they were placed, and how they were marginalized in a very different way in terms of how, like I just said, in terms of diversity in the discussion when it comes to Black children. I hope that made sense. Okay, rambled a bit.
It did. No, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. I know it's not always easy to share that, especially on the platform in front of the community. So I just, want to appreciate that and all of you for sharing. I'm curious, has anybody else ever thought about moving? And if they have, what were their reasons, even if it was just an inkling? I'd just be curious.
Well, I wanted to kind of piggyback on what Saria said about kids in school, because I have 4. And they've all come through D97 and D200, except for one. Well, my son, my baby boy he's 17 now, he's not a baby, but I chose not to send him to the high school. So I thought that it had come to a time where I didn't feel that D97 was properly educating my child, or not even educating, just dealing with him in a way that is equitable, just giving him a chance. Because I do have a child that receives special education services and he needs them. But then I had a son who didn't need those services, and he was kind of ushered into this program because my other son received services. And then when I felt like he no longer needed them, I kind of got some like backlash with removing him from the program. And so of course, me being me, I was successful with removing my youngest boy from the special education program. But I want him to he attends St. Patrick High School in Belmont, Austin. And it's not that it's a diverse school, you know, because it's still a very white school, a very white space. But my husband was a teacher there, and I felt that having a parent at the school with him would give him a better chance. Because it, to me, in any educational system, if you're a parent and you're not really involved, your kids will kind of be, I don't know what's a good term, but they won't be as well served as other children. So you kind of have to be involved. And with my husband in the building, I knew that if he had an issue, he could go right there and he could deal with it, because my son is 6'4". He's a very tall Black man. And I know that in D97, if you're a tall Black man, it intimidates some predominantly female white teachers. And I knew everything that came with that. And that's with, you know, being expelled or being disciplined more. And when they cannot teach certain Black children, they get labeled. And so I thought that was the best thing for him. So that's what I did for my Black son. But my other son came through the program, and he needed all of those services. He had really good teachers and really good program, and he did really well. But I just knew that my other son would not fare as well. So.
Got it. No, thank you for sharing that too. And I understand how annoying and how beneficial it can be to have a parent in the school with you. My dad taught at the same school I went to up until 8th grade. So I understand how beneficial that can be for a Black person, Black man navigating a predominantly white space, to have another Black man in the building that you know and love. Anybody else have anything they'd like to add? Any thoughts about, have they ever thought about leaving? Anything else you'd like to add about anything that was discussed? Perfect.
No, yes, because I want a big house. I mean, when you talk about buying a home in Oak Park, I mean, the taxes are so high, either you get a very little small house, you know, and for that same amount of money, you can get a huge house in Lombard or Bolingbrook or a neighboring suburb. But for me, it won't be Oak Park. It won't be my hometown. So as we're house hunting now, I'm like, I mean, I might just have to settle for the little bitty house, because I can't imagine being outside of my network, being outside of my friendships, being outside of the community that embraces me and I embrace and that I love. So I don't think I'll move, but man, it's tempting when I'm looking at houses and I'm like, I see where my money could go. I'm like, but I'm here.
Yeah. It's a very real dynamic. I mean, we all know about the disparities in wealth for Black people compared to other ethnic groups. So it's really no mystery here that is a even more tough dynamic that Black people have to navigate, that we all have to navigate. Anybody else have anything want to add there?
So I'm not house hunting, but I am husband hunting. And as a gay Black man in Oak Park, I gotta say there's not a lot of us. The dating pool here is really small, and if I've ever thought about leaving Oak Park, it's solely because I'm like, oh well, I mean, I got better prospects. Like, I'm just saying, like, I got goals. I want that big house, but I don't want to pay for it. So but yeah, no, like real, like, I mean, I guess that is a real reason why I would leave Oak Park, but nothing that's ever been like, oh, like, I don't like this. I think I've always just wondered what else was out there because it is so familiar to me.
No, thank you for sharing that. And that makes a lot of sense to me. People base, you know, where they're living off of on who they want to date or marry often. So it makes sense that that's something you're thinking about. And you know, let me ask you a question. Why do you think Oak Park doesn't attract younger, gay Black men?
A variety of reasons. One, I think that there isn't really like a community hub that supports them or serves them. If we look at all of the LGBT organizations in this area, they all skew towards older gay white men. And if you look at just who makes up the LGBT population, or I guess who's more visible and who gets invited to sit on panels like these, it's traditionally the older, maybe middle-aged white gay man who's married. It's very, you know, heteronormalized in a way. And I think that because we are very conservative in our values of what the nuclear family is here, that it just doesn't attract people who that doesn't appeal to. And yeah, you know, also like we have nothing going on, like as a town, like, I mean, you can't do anything after like 11 o'clock. There's like nowhere to really like go hang out. Like, you know, I think that there are a variety of issues at play there. But yeah, no, I just think that it's not really like, it's not a place they'd ever consider unless they get married and like, you know, want to buy a house.
Got it. Well, we're going to stay right there if anybody, unless anybody else has anything else they'd like to add. Cool. So this question is actually for you, Darien. You mentioned earlier, of course, and you just talked about, you know, you grew up Black and gay in Oak Park. Just curious how you've navigated being both Black and gay in Oak Park, two very different dynamics. You know, that have always, the Black community and the gay community have not always had the best relationship, we'll say. I'll let you talk more about that. But how have you navigated that dynamic in Oak Park?
Oh, that's a great question. How have I navigated it? So like, you know, and I think I've like had to work up to being able to say this, but like I had a really great experience growing up in Oak Park because I was gay. If I were just a Black man in Oak Park, I think I would have had a very different experience. But I think that because I was gay, I was a little friendlier. Because I wear purses, I'm a little less intimidating. They're not purses anymore. They're like hold on satchels from, you know, J. Crew now. But you know, I think that like because my gayness is so, and probably my more salient identity, if I'm being honest, between my Black identity and my LGBT identity, I think that like it allowed me to kind of push past all the discrimination I was experiencing, and really just have this like bright personality and be this fun character that everybody wanted me to be. I was still on the quarter 4 times, like, and I wasn't even smart. Like, I mean, like that only happened because like I had the ability to talk to people, which, you know, I think that I used those attributes that everybody saw as positive in my LGBT identity to kind of mask my Black identity. And it wasn't until I came back here and I went to school in a very small conservative Christian town. And I realized that I do have a Black identity, that it does affect these things. And coming back here now, it's, you know, it's really weird, I think, to sit here and, you know, talk about like, oh, like I saw somebody like clutch their purse when I was walking my dog this morning. And, you know, I think that growing up, I would have never thought that like that was a bad thing. But that was because I was supplementing all those feelings and also dealing with this whole, can I be Black and gay? What are my parents gonna say about this? I grew up in a Catholic church. I was an altar server. Very like very weird Catholic Christian life. All the things I wish I could say, but yeah, no, I think that like the way I navigated it was by shedding a lot of my Black identity and living in my LGBT identity. And that's something that I'm actively working on now as an adult and as a professional about how those two things can live in the same place.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. Really appreciate your honesty there. A lot of it resonated with me. So my dad is actually grew up Black, gay, and in the Catholic Church, and has told me so many stories. And you can imagine, I'm sure some people in the audience, we can imagine, you know, what it's like growing up being told you're going to hell well, in Darien's case, at altar practice, and then at the, and then on Saturday, and so on and so forth. So definitely understand that. I want to hone in a little bit. Do you think you've been treated any differently by different ethnic groups in Oak Park? Specifically, have you been treated by Black people versus white people in Oak Park? And let's focus on from age of 18 on down, not necessarily your adult life.
Yes. Um, I think that like no, 100% yes, right? Like I have always been like white women love me. Like I say that like all the time. Like I'm like that person, I'm okay. But like I think that like sometimes when I'm interacting with like black people, like they didn't understand me. They didn't like get the thing. I also like I had a lot of the, oh, you speak really like clearly for like a black kid. And like all my family was on the west side of Chicago. So like growing up in this swelling of privilege, and my dad has a lot of kids and I'm the only one that lives with his mother. And I think that that created a really interesting dynamic for me growing up, and that like most of my interactions, people kind of felt that I always was bougier, or that like I thought I was better than them. And like, and I always would say, it's not that I think I'm better than you. I just like really pretty things and you don't. Like, if that makes you think that I'm better than you, like then by all means, like I think that's more of your issue than it is mine. But like I definitely think that especially pre-18, I was treated very differently by the Black community. And I think that over time, as homosexuality has become like more normalized, it's like a little more Gucci now. Like, like my best friend is like a Black straight gay man. Like, I think that I've gotten over that, but it definitely, I think growing up was a major thing that I once again pushed to the side and didn't think about.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing all that. Really appreciate it. Again, just want to acknowledge, I know everything, is not always easy to say on the platform in front of your community. So really appreciate you sharing that. The next question is actually going to be for Jacques. And this evening, we really wanted to make sure we highlighted the Black immigrant experience in America and in Oak Park. I feel like the Black immigrant experience is often lumped together with the whole Black experience, and I personally, and please correct me if I'm wrong, personally think there's a unique perspective there. There's a unique experience there that we want to make sure we highlighted tonight. So can you talk a little bit about your experience immigrating to the United States and what it's like being a Black immigrant in Oak Park?
Yeah, yeah, Christian, thanks. So, I mean, first, let me sort of touch on the perspective that I come from. Back in the continent, Cameroon especially, there's bias, and there's bias everywhere. But growing up, I understood bias as it related to gender, tribe, class, and in some instances, age. None of it is acceptable. But so coming to the US, yeah, there's bias here, and except it's more intense around race, obviously gender, and sexual orientation. But as a Black person, I'm seen as a Black person, right? So it's usually the way people think when they see you, the orientation and Black, period. So that initiates that experience, negative or positive. And then as an immigrant, it becomes obvious, obviously, as I engage with people and I've got an accent and know where you're from, and then they start noticing the difference. But I'm Black first. So I go through the same sort of bias that we all experience as Black people, and then immigrants later.
Christian, you're
Thank you. Sorry, no, I definitely understand that. And I'm curious, did you make the decision to move to the United States? And if so, why did you make that decision? Yeah.
Yeah, that's very really good question, because I come from a very big family, and everybody, all my eldest sisters and brothers, oriented towards Great Britain and Europe. So I was the first in my family to venture to the US and settle here, and then eventually everybody many nephews and nieces came in. But my decision was, I was always different and radical and always thought different. But the triggering point was meeting a Peace Corps group and some missionaries that came from the US. When I was growing up, I had a very wonderful experience through the Catholic system, and that gave me a perspective that was different than what I was used to, Europe and Great Britain specifically, and that's what positioned me to learn more. So I started at a very, very early age to learn about the US, and I would go to the embassy and read about the US. So that's really, I wanted to do something different than the rest of my family, and I was fascinated by everything that I'd read and the experience I had with some of the Peace Corps folks that I met.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And just so I'm trying to put the timeline together. So you came to the US, did you come straight to Oak Park, or did you live somewhere for a period before?
Yeah, no, so I actually went to college up in Binghamton in New York. I came first to go to the university, and then I transferred to Washington University down in St. Louis. And then from there, when I graduated, I came to Chicago, and I lived in the city until I met my wife, and then we decided, okay, if we're going to start a family, where would it be? And so then that's when we looked at the three places: Hyde Park, Evanston, and Oak Park, and decided here.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. And one more question for you. I was trying to formulate it this whole time, but I think it's that, what was that moment, if you remember, what was that moment in Oak Park or in Chicago or in America where you're like, oh yeah, there's racial bias here that I have not seen before back in Cameroon?
Yeah, that's a good one. I always take a position of my integrity, my intelligence, my knowledge about a subject matter. If I don't know something, I stay quiet and I listen. Because of my background of being used to the bias of gender, tribe, and class and age, race, yes, I kind of learned that in my environment that is an issue and I need to be aware of it. So I could say that my experience all through my life in the US has been predominantly good. I've engaged with people of different types. I don't make assumptions. I don't take people for granted. And I have friends across the board. But I can tell you that I was extremely disappointed with my first real blatant experience little about 6-7 years ago. I play and have been coaching from AYSO to, you name it, pick-up soccer. I practically started the pick-up soccer here, and it's grown. And then there's a league going on, and I play with a lot of the Jamaican brethren. The most blatant, really annoying happened 6 years ago. We were practicing at the OPRF turf, and one of the coaches, and I remember exactly who he is, basically, I wasn't there, but when I came, he was really being very nasty to the team, my team members, and obviously you could tell it was racist, basic racist. There's no other way to interpret it. And then he wanted them to leave because he had preference on the playground, and they were leaving. And while they were leaving, he calls the security. The security comes. These are African American guys. I could see we could connect. They were like uncomfortable because they knew nothing was going on, and it was a racist situation. That really got to me. And the big struggle was I really didn't know how to navigate the system to really do something about it. And I look back at it right now, that really, really upsets me. But that to me was probably the most blatant experience of racism that was pointedly in my face.
Got it. No, thanks for sharing. I'm sorry that happened. It does happen. And so there are those moments that just, there's no denying it.
Yep.
So I definitely understand. Anybody else have anything they'd like to add there before we move on to the next question?
Christian, what was the question again? We're talking about racism.
So we were specifically talking, just trying to highlight the Black immigrant experience and some of Jacques' experiences that he's had that may be similar, different than non-Black immigrants in Oak Park. Perfect. Well, the next question is for everybody. So most of you are pretty active in Oak Park, and I know that from personal experience that sometimes comes with being one of the only, if not the only, Black person in the room. How do you navigate that dynamic? I won't editorialize anymore, so I'll just leave the question there.
So, I need a little more explanation. Like, so you're asking about how we navigate
sometimes being the only Black person in the room, in Oak Park rooms specifically.
I think when you grow up in Oak Park, I don't know about anyone else, but I've been here since 1978, and I've always been the only Black person in the room. Like, I don't even know any other way to be. And I mean, I did it after so many years. It's just like, this is what it is, especially in the late 70s, early 80s, when the idea was that if we're going to diversify our schools, that we can't put all 6 of the Black kids in 4th grade or 3rd grade into one classroom. We have to put 1 in each homeroom. And so that's what they did. If there were like 5 or 6 of us, all of us were put in separate rooms. And I remember the only time I got to play with Black children was during lunch recess, because that was the only time we were all together. And how difficult it was in the classroom trying to make friends with non-Black children. For example, in kindergarten, there was a long line of girls, and they were braiding each other's hair. And I was told I had to be at the end of the line because my hair was greasy and dirty. And so I could braid their hair, but they wouldn't touch my hair. And I just, that stuck with me for a very long time. And, in kindergarten, I'm like, then I come home to my mother and I'm like, this is what's been told. And of course, my mother, being the assertive woman that she is, was like, well, the next time this happens, or she would, try to teach me how to read people, so I think by 1st or 2nd grade, I just became very, I don't want to say aggressive, but I was going to smash it before it smashed me. And I remember thinking that I'm going to go in there, and before they can say anything bad to me, I'm going to buck up. So that became my personality. It's just to be, I didn't want to deal with it. And so before racism could find me, I had that look like, you better not even try it. And that better not even try it look came along with being 5'8" or 5'9" in 6th grade. I was already a very tall girl. So then I got the bully label because I wasn't tolerant of what I refused to be anyone's victim. So then I got labeled the bully. And then I remember in 6th grade, there was a teacher, 5th grade. I remember, what was the singer's name? Time After Time. Cyndi Lauper, was it Cyndi Lauper with Time After Time? And she wore the mini skirts with the leggings and the bangles and the whole thing.
I think that was Cyndi Lauper.
Yeah, so I wanted to do that, right? So I got my mini skirt with my leggings on and my bangles all the way up. And my teacher said, take that stuff off. You look like a streetwalker. And I was in 5th grade. And I didn't even know what a streetwalker was. And so I kind of asked someone else, and he was like, well, he just called you a hoe. So of course, me being me, went back to the teacher and we went back and forth. And the teacher called my mother and said that, I had said these things to him that were disrespectful. But what I didn't know is there was one Black teacher that was in this pod area, Mr. Earl Batoy. I don't know if anyone remembers Mr. Batoy, but he was an awesome Black educator in Oak Park at Longfellow School. He heard the whole exchange. And he then told my mother exactly what happened. And she didn't know that this white, tall male teacher had called me basically a prostitute. And finally, I felt validation, because my mother was from the schools. If these teachers are saying these things about you, they must be true, because this is the teacher. And she didn't really think that a teacher would lie on a child. But I didn't realize then that I had met a lot of racist teachers who were singling me out. And I didn't know it was racism, because when you're young, you don't know what racism is. You just know you feel it. And that was racism that I was experiencing and feeling.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Said a lot. Let me just say, and I know you know it now, but your curls are beautiful, and I'm sure they were then too. I know they were then too. Really appreciate you being honest about all of that. And I want to just take a moment. I don't want us to trivialize any of the experiences we've heard tonight as like one-off incidents or things that happened in a park one day or something that happened to Juanta when she was a child. Each of these experiences that you're hearing are something that white Oak Parkers, white Oak Parkers do not have to deal with. And they're things that Black Oak Parkers do have to deal with and navigate and add on to our psyche and affect our mental health and the way we navigate the world. So I just want us to make sure that we understand each of these experiences affect people in very different ways. I just wanted to honor that for a moment. Anybody else want to jump in?
I would say it depends on the context, if it's about some diversity stuff, I usually have to pray before I go in the room, because it's only so much, the conversation gets repetitive after a while. So if we're not going to do anything, I get really frustrated. So that that has happened with, being the only Black person in the room, and it can be uncomfortable. I don't know if there's not a stated expectation that you have to say something, but I feel like sometimes you feel like there's an expectation to say something. And so I would say it's probably in the past, I would not have had as much, well, maybe I would have. I maybe would have, but I know now I do have a little bit more trepidation being the only Black person in the room, because having a conversation amongst Black people is very different than having the same conversation amongst white people.
Understood.
Yeah, I personally, I think I empathize with what you're saying. I try to, if I'm going to find myself as the only Black person in the room for whatever reason, obviously I think through the purpose of me being there. That's just me. And if I don't know much, I just listen. But most of the time, I'm probably a subject matter expert in whatever is going on. So I'm not intimidated. I just plow through the purpose of being there. So and I found myself in many instances working for IBM and Oracle and then Salesforce, where that was the case. But again, it always came down to why am I there and what do I know about the purpose of being there? And I usually just stay focused on that, because otherwise you notice things and how people are behaving towards you.
Understood. And thank you for sharing how you navigate that. Thank you, Saria, as well. And yes, a lot of what all of you said resonated with me in that when you're in these spaces, when you grow up in these spaces, you learn how to navigate them. And in different ways, we all respond differently. And to the point, like we're now, like I mentioned, I'm a professional coach earlier. I help coach Black people that grew up in predominantly Black neighborhoods on how to interact in corporate America and like how to navigate the workplace. And so it's interesting. I never saw it as a skill, I guess, before. It was just life. But it is a added skill that many Black people have in this community to be able to navigate that dynamic. I appreciate you all being honest about that.
But Christian, are we talking about assimilation, or are we talking about code switching when we talk about navigating predominantly white spaces as a Black person?
I was trying so hard not to name it myself
as
moderator, but yes, code switching was what I was referring to.
Okay, so with code switching, I try not to do it. I think I make very conscious decisions to be authentically me in every space that I'm in, and I try to like ease people into me. I don't know, it's like an introduction to me. Like, okay, so I start off with the standard Midwestern English, and then here and there I might throw in, some who I am until they're comfortable enough to be me and accept the whole me all the time. I can't give people too much at one time because I'm like a rich beverage. You gotta be slow with this. So I walk them into who I am. But I try not to lose myself in predominantly white spaces and to hold on to being authentically me in those, and to not give away my power in those situations, and to make sure that I'm validating my experiences, my culture, my language, my everything that is Black, that is me, that I know. I bring that into every situation that I'm in, because if you can't accept that, then that's a part of you not being able to accept me. And if I'm not welcome in this space being me, then I would care not to be in this space, whatever it is. And so another thing that I think a lot of Black people do, I know I've done, of course, we all get these extended degrees, right? So I have a whole bunch of letters behind my name. And so I am comfortable sometimes being me because I can use $10 million words, and I can also use those other words at the same time and interchange them. So that's another way I think I've learned personally, have learned how to be myself and be predominant and sometimes dominate white spaces. And another thing that I've learned to do is to bring other Black girls into spaces that are predominantly white, and to make those spaces accessible to Black girls, like with the Tea Party. Like this, we deserve to see and be in beautiful spaces also. And the more exposure we give to Black girls, Black children, Black people, then the more comfortable they are at being themselves in those spaces, because those spaces are for us too. And we're all reclaiming our own spaces in Oak Park, because like we did with Westgate over there, we reclaimed that space. The whole world belongs to all of us. So every space that you're in, you deserve to be in, and you deserve to feel comfortable in. And so I think one of the things I've tried to do as a Black woman is to bring Black girls into these spaces, make them comfortable, and to reclaim them for them.
Thank you. Thank you. That's an important perspective too. And I love that. And I can say I just got to that point within the last year and a half of learning to not code switch in Oak Park. And it's had different realities, and different dynamics I've had to navigate. So I definitely respect your courage and to do that. We're gonna move on actually to a question for Sydney. You've graduated OPRF more recently than Darien, Juanta, and I. So very curious about, for you, what it was like growing up in Oak Park, and even more specifically, what was your experience like at OPRF? And were you there at the time they filmed the documentary?
Yeah, all 3 years. I think something that is my reality is different, being mixed and truly being very fair skinned, and also being tracked since kindergarten at Lincoln Elementary School into gifted and talented programming. And so there were many ways where I would look around when I was in honors classes and AP classes when I was in high school, and really recognize that I was the only period person of color, or person who was even half Black or partially Black or identified as not just white. But that was something that I've kind of been used to my entire childhood. And also, like, I forgot to mention this earlier, but part of the reason my parents settled in Oak Park is my mom is from Hillside, and a lot of her family lives in the west suburbs. My dad's family from Ohio, in a different state, though. And so I grew up around my mom's side of my family. Being at OPRF was one of those things where I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to have been able to go there, because my scholarship to the University of Chicago was through OPRF. And there are so many people I was able to network with. But I know that what was integral to my successful educational experience was having my mom extremely hands-on in my school, like always in communication with my teachers, post-it notes by the time I got home about the stuff I needed to check in on, and having uh, generally family members who were very encouraging of me, like continually pursuing my academics. And we're able to invest in that for me. So I was really able to benefit a lot from OPRF, but it's one of those things where I recognize that's genuinely not the same experience for a lot of other students.
Got it. Yeah, and I think you're right that it hasn't been the same for everybody, but glad it was good for you, and want to highlight that, that it was good for some people. I always tell people it did a lot for me as well. So I definitely want to respect and honor that perspective too. Um, do you feel you would be different if you had different personality, different aspirations, if you had grown up in a predominantly Black community?
This is a conversation that my family now has had a lot, because growing up, not that my parents totally didn't acknowledge race, but they really had more of the perspective like, we're in love, like, color doesn't necessarily matter, like, our children are wonderful, thriving people, and they'll be able to do whatever they want in the world. But as my sister and I have a twin sister, who's darker complexion than me, different eye color, so we don't necessarily look the same, and she's not white passing as I am. But especially seeing how her and I grew into the world and going off to college in different places, and realizing that that reality was not at all the case in the broad scheme of the world. We've had to reflect a lot on what it meant to grow up in a space, not even saying it wasn't predominantly Black or that didn't have more Black people or biracial people like me around me, but in a place where, or within the mindset that Oak Park loves to purport, that um, of diversity, inclusion, really being at the crux of everyone's experience here. And I think that that is more so speaking to like what Wanta said. Oftentimes, students of color are kind of used and diluted to the benefit of the diversity experience of other white students. Like, it's not necessarily to our benefit that we are the only people of color, Black people in rooms. It's like, because white families can say, yes, my children are around people of all different, they have Black friends. They can't, they won't see color. They'll grow up colorblind. But that doesn't address like the crux of the racial issues that Black people experience. It pretty much is just putting them to the sidelines to be like, this is beneficial to the broader scheme of things. That's just my perspective.
No, and I really appreciate it. And I think that it's real, and definitely that dynamic between you and your sister sounds fascinating, and I'm sure one that you all have unpacked, as you said. So I appreciate you sharing all of that. Cool. I'm going to shift gears to a question for Wanta and Saria. And this is about impressions and takeaways of the local Oak Park election that we just had. Just to recap, Juanta ran for village trustee in the 2021 election cycle, and Saria ran for Oak Park Library Board in the 2021 election cycle. So very curious to hear both of their thoughts and takeaways from having navigated that experience. And full disclosure, I've ran for local political office 2 times myself. So excited to hear about you all's experience. Whoever would like to go first.
I would say it was a rather smooth, it was a very positive experience. I feel like that was, you know, it was a time where I really saw our Black community really come around and support the Black candidates, and it was really helpful. I thought that it was just, it's something I've always envisioned in how we come together for in Oak Park. So it was wonderful to see more from my perspective, because I believe it's happened before. I just didn't always observe it, you know, in my own experience, because I'm in my own world a lot. So it was good to get out my own world and see it. So I would say it was a positive experience from that aspect. I think the negative experience was we saw like folks start to feel threatened by Black people coming together and supporting Black candidates. And now I'll pass it over to Juanta because she can speak more to that than myself.
Oh gosh, it was horrible, and it's something that I will never do again. And I can firmly say that it was horrible. It was one of the most horrible experiences of my life. And I've never felt so silenced, so threatened. I've never seen such racism in Oak Park before in my life. And I did it took everything in me to keep doing it. Everything. Yeah, it was hard. It was very hard just to be constantly drugged through every social media platform every day was hard. The positive thing was what Saria said about the support from the Black community and from the allies. That was positive. But it's like, I don't know I know what it is. It's the last administration brought out, and I'm talking about Trump, I'm not talking about Ford, really brought to light all the negative nastiness and racism that exists in the community. And they were just very threatened that there were so many lies, and they used this whole defund the police platform as if it were my platform, as if we were going to, that's what we had all sat down and decided, that we're going to go in here and defund their police. Like that was our goal, when it wasn't even on my list of things to do. And it was used against us. There was a shadow campaign that came up with defund the police. These people are going to defund your police signs. That campaign was almost as strong as ours. The defund the police campaign. They were sending out things to people's houses. They took out spreads in the Wednesday Journal. This whole fear tactic of when Black people take office is that your safety is at risk, is what they sold everyone on. Well, people who they could sell on, is that we were going to defund the police. And every positive thing, I wanted to defend myself on social media so many times, but one, I have a very public job. I work at the library, as most people know. And two, it would not have benefited my campaign for me to defend myself. And so I was so glad that people were coming and to my defense, because they were saying things that I wanted to say, but I couldn't say. I felt silenced. And all I was trying to do was be the voice of renters in our community, because I'm a renter and I've been a renter all my life. And I felt like there were people who were basically saying, I know what's best for renters. I used to be a renter before I was a homeowner. Just sit down and sit over there. We got this, you know. And basically my intelligence was questioned. My everything about me was questioned and picked apart. And it was hurtful. And it was something I don't ever wish to do again. And so I'll just continue to serve, because I'm a very service-minded person. So, and because I believe this is my community, I've drank that Kool-Aid, that I'll just continue to serve without that title. Because, and people were saying, do we have to vote for all of them, all three of them? As if, like, no one has ever said if they're all white candidates, did we have to vote for all the white people? Never. But when Black candidates were running, it was, if we have one, then we have enough. If we just pick one of them, we have enough. And people were saying, don't run with them, that you guys will never make it if you run together as a Black slate. We weren't even a slate. We were just supporting each other, because we knew that in Oak Park, the only way that we could get those petitions signed, or what are those things? The petitions or whatever, to get those signatures, we had to work together. And as Black people, that's what we know in America. If we don't work together, we can't make it. And so we just worked together, because we had no one else. And then when we started to raise money, oh, it was too much money. They're raising, what are they going to do with all that money? It's too much money. We could do nothing right. So we came up with, we had a whole, we're Black people with a racial, we had a plan, you know, for how to enact equity and things. And even that was questioned. I mean, I'm like, I'm Black. If anyone knows about racial equity, it would be me. It would be us. And even that was picked apart, and that wasn't right. So, you know, I knew I wasn't going to win going in, but I just had to do it, because if I looked at the table, I'm like, there are no renters there, and there needs to be a renter at that table. It needs to be someone that isn't a homeowner, that isn't rich, that isn't a white man. There needs to be a Black woman at that table from my economic background, because how can you make decisions based on all of Oak Parkers when you don't have the voices in the room? So I wanted to be, you know, Hamilton in the room where it happened. And I mean, that didn't happen for me this time, but I have a lot of faith in Chibuike Enya. And I was grateful that he won, because I think he's doing some wonderful things. But man, I'd be lying if I say it wasn't hard.
Thank you both for sharing. Really appreciate
Christian, I just wanted to quickly piggyback, because I think
take a minute. We're gonna be winding up soon, but go ahead, take a minute.
Okay, it'll be quick, because the viciousness online actually caused me to shut down the Facebook profile. And I did disregard that, because that was ridiculous what they did to the candidates. And that's why I can only speak from that one sliver of Black folks that we were supporting each other. But something, that dynamic on Facebook and how Oak Park operates on Facebook has got to change. And that's all I want to add.
No, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate both your perspectives. We needed both of you at the tables. I'm sorry, neither of you will be at the tables that we need you at in Oak Park, but I know you'll still keep your voices in the community, and I'm excited to see where that goes. And also want to acknowledge this really isn't a fair question. It took me a full year to process the election in 2019, and I could not have talked eloquently about it 3 months after the election. As I look back at it now, how could I have even begun to explain 6 months of microaggressions to someone who doesn't believe in microaggressions, doesn't know what they are, and has never experienced them? So, and then in your case, well, I mean, let's just name it. It was just aggression. It wasn't, it surpassed micro that I experienced in the 2019 election. So We're going to be wrapping up here shortly. I asked the audience just for 5 more minutes because I do want to get this one last question in to kind of tie us in together this evening, but want to be respectful of all the panelists' time too. The last question is, what do you take pride in about Oak Park? And more specific, the second follow-up question is, what do you want people to see about the Black community in Oak Park, or about you in Oak Park, that they don't always see? Darren, you want to kick us off?
Oh, putting me on the spot there. Can you repeat the first half of your question?
What do you take pride in about Oak Park?
I think we have the ability to change. I don't know if everybody's committed to it, but I do think that we have made some progress. I think that we are going to continue to hopefully make progress. And, what I look at is that I am a 28-year-old entrepreneur who manages and works with some of the biggest names in our village. Both candidates who ran for village president came to me and asked me to work for their campaign. Quasi-governmental organizations come to my firm. Black people are powerful. I think that we are building a movement. I think everybody on this call has played a piece of that role. And, I think that the more power that we collect, the more boundaries we push, the more initiatives that we can get off the ground. I only see us becoming more powerful, and I think that we're going to be able to start having more of these conversations in more spaces. And I'm really looking forward to that evolution of Oak Park, and I think we're right on the precipice of it.
Thank you. Whoever would like to go next. And again, it was, what do you take pride about in Oak Park, and what do you want people to see about you or Black Oak Park that they don't always see?
I'll go next. I think we should take pride that despite the challenges we have here in Oak Park, some of the really blatant racism, some of which I think has been described here, as compared to some other communities, we've got a good base to build off. I think that's something we should be proud of. It's not easy. It's not radically different, but it's slightly better. But we do have a foundation historically to be able to build from. I think that's something we should take pride on. What I'd like to, at least my contribution in the community from a different to make a difference as a Black person, is to show extreme positivity. It's just let the action just overpower your color. It's so blatantly powerful. The show of love, the show of competence. You're different. You do things different. You do things better. I think that it's a very loud message. At least that's my perspective.
Thank you. Whoever wants to jump in there.
So I think what I'm most proud of, when I think of the proudest moment, like if I ever thought about the summer of 2021, I would think about the Juneteenth cookout that we just had. Even though there was no press and nobody came out, paper wasn't there, but we showed up, and it was just the most genuine expression of celebration of freedom and collaboration. And I've met some wonderful allies, and we were just all together. So when I think about Oak Park, I think what I've learned, what keeps me in Oak Park, is that there are some of us who are committed to being the thing we say that we are committed to promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion and being that. And we are just forwardly moving towards that all the time. And so I challenge myself, like if something is missing in the community, to just fill that gap with something, with programming, with whatever it needs, and to bring people on board and to make sure that we're meeting the needs of younger people, because I think it's where it starts with the youth. And so I'm proud of my community because I think that we're really proactive in meeting the needs of our youth. And something about me, what was that other part? That people don't know? I think people pretty much know everything about me. Just a really open book. But just about me is that, I'm really just dedicated to serving this community in whatever way I can.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, Sydney.
I think that my point kind of piggybacks wonderfully off of what Juanta was just talking about. What I take pride in Oak Park, what I thought of was all of the Black spaces that are kept up with, like the beauty supply places or the hair salons, whether it be certain hangouts, whether it be a certain place where you can go to eat and there's other Black people congregating there, or it's just a type of, whether it's like a religious group that you get together and it's all people of color, Black people. I think I really take pride in those types of things that exist in Oak Park, because as to what I was speaking about before, oftentimes Blackness is only appreciated, funded, or like, I guess I would say given the space to flourish in Oak Park, as long as it's totally accessible for white people to kind of engage with it and take whatever they think that they can benefit from with it, I think to an extent, like diluted. And I think that it's wonderful how despite that reality and despite being the minority, there are still a lot of like fully Black, whether it's organizations or just groups of people who have maintained their own sub-communities in Oak Park this whole time. And you kind of just have to know by word of mouth and being around. Because like Juanta said, they won't be featured in the newspaper, but it doesn't mean people are not literally out here. So.
Thank you. That's a good reminder. Saria, anything you'd like to add?
I would say, just to add on to what everyone else has said, I think Black folks in Oak Park are some of the most talented, like incredible people. And there's a foundation here to influence not only Oak Park, but the greater Chicago area. I think that there's, such potential, and hopefully the ability to tap into it is more forthcoming than it is far away.
Thank you all. We're going to end it there since we are a little bit over. We could have talked another hour, obviously, but I really appreciate all of your time and sharing your experiences. And I'm excited for where we're going to go from here. After talking with all of you all, I was worried this conversation was going to drain me and put me down, but I was validated in a lot of ways, heard some new things, different things I hadn't thought about. And I just really appreciate you all being here and sharing your experiences. And I appreciate having your Black voice in Oak Park. So I will hand it back to Tatiana.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for such an honest conversation. I loved being in the space and just getting to listen. I had it very easy. Thank you. It was great to see all these faces. I want to quickly plug Black businesses. Jacques Coffee Shop, Kribi Coffee. You should go. Darien's marketing agency, DM-Burton. If you need any marketing help, look them up. Anyone else wants to plug anything, please do. And last thing, the library sends feedback forms to all attendees. I'll email it to you all tomorrow morning. If you can take a couple minutes, please fill it out. It helps us as we continue planning programming like this. And so thank you again, everyone, for spending your night with us.